Thanks for downloading this podcast. I started learning about the situation in Western Sahara a couple of years ago when I went to an incredible night of music called Sahara Nights. I was completely transported and have had a bit of a soft spot for the desert and this issue ever since. I'm also a keen runner, so when I heard about the Saharawi athlete turned activist, the pieces of the puzzle started to slot into place. So here it is, my story about exile and exercise. I hope you enjoy it. Salah? Salah, really nice to meet you.
Salah, hello.
Tasharafna. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Nicola Kelly, and for assignment on the BBC World Service, I've travelled to North Africa to meet professional long-distance runner Salah Ameidan. We're deep in the Sahara Desert, in a place marked on most maps with a dotted line. A land divided by a vast fortified wall separating thousands of families. A place that many countries don't recognise as a state, the disputed territory of Western Sahara, where Salah will soon be joining hundreds of athletes in a peaceful protest, a race through the desert. Do you have any family members here supporting you for the race?
My small family is in the occupied territory, but I am banned from visiting them.
Salah is from land now controlled by Morocco, what the indigenous Saharawi people call the occupied territories, but which Morocco claims as its southern provinces following a bitter and bloody war more than 40 years ago.
My father passed away a year and a half ago, and I wasn't allowed to see him.
He's been banned from visiting his family, and if they travel to see him, they wouldn't be allowed to return home. Salah's a lithe, chiselled guy, and he's surprisingly shy, with long eyelashes that peep out from behind his signature aviator sunglasses. Something of a local celebrity around the camps, he's more than just an athlete. He's become a symbol of the Sahrawi resistance after years of being forced to run for the national Moroccan athletics team. Does he want anything to drink or anything? At a cafe nearby, he explains how tensions surrounding his status as a Moroccan runner began to come to the surface.
In 2000, I took part in a race in the occupied territories, and I won, but I was forbidden from taking the prize. A dispute took place between my family and the organizing committee. And at that time, I began to think about how to make my own way and to get myself out of this system.
He and a friend decided to stage a protest in which Salah, on entering the stadium at the end of an international athletics meet, would raise the Sahrawi flag, illegal in Morocco, a defiant political act.
I felt a sense of freedom, and for the first time, a sense of responsibility. I put myself and my family at risk, but I felt that I was supporting my people inside the occupied territories.
Forced into exile in France and unable to return home since, Salah continues to use running as a way to highlight the plight of his people, and he's come back to do just that.
It is a weapon that I can use to amplify my people's voices, and a peaceful one.
Does running mean freedom?
It's a part of freedom you get to taste when you run, but it is incomplete and unfinished freedom. As long as my land is occupied, I cannot fully enjoy my freedom.
Once a Spanish colony, when the settlers left Western Sahara in 1975, Moroccan troops moved in from the north, claiming the territory had originally belonged to them. A brutal, bloody war ensued between the Moroccans and the indigenous Saharawi people, lasting more than 16 years. Morocco won and divided the land by building a wall known as the berm that stretches the length of the disputed territories. To the west of the wall, spreading out along the Atlantic coast, is land that Morocco claims, but that Sahrawis say is a legally occupied territory. To the east of the wall, stretching across parched, cracked desert flatlands, are what Sahrawis call the liberated territories, controlled by the Sahrawi's POLISARIO front. Well, it's an absolutely scorching day here in the desert. We've just crossed the Algerian border and we're now hurtling our way through what the Sahrawis call the liberated territories, but what the Moroccans argue is a buffer zone. A 5-hour drive off-road past prickly shrubland and a few lonely-looking acacia trees takes us past the wall. My translator and guide Mohammed tells me what the berm represents for him as a Sahrawi.
It's a barrier and it's a separation wall that separates our families. I have 2 half-brothers that I have never seen in my entire life. It's the wall of shame because for what it represents. It denies the Sahrawi their right to access their land, to live freely, and it's contaminates the land.
At 2,700 kilometres, this is the second longest wall in the world after the Great Wall of China, and one of the most heavily landmined regions of the planet.
Over 7 million landmines are planted. The landmines still harvest and kill the Sahrawi, both on this side and on the other side in the occupied territory.
Human rights organisations, diplomats and journalists have been banned from crossing the wall into those areas since 2015, preventing me from hearing the Moroccan side of the story. But publicly, Morocco recently reiterated its intention to secure international recognition of its claim over Western Sahara. Everywhere I look, the carcasses of burnt-out vehicles and artillery shells dot the landscape, remnants from the war. Further eastwards, over the Algerian border, are the camps, where hundreds of thousands of Sahrawis fled, seeking refuge when the conflict broke out. It was to be a temporary move, but a generation later, political deadlock has led to 165,000 people wholly reliant on basic aid supplies. That's where I'm staying and where Salah's run is taking place. Zorgan Larussi, my host for the week, was part of the first wave of refugees pushed into the desert when the Moroccans moved into his village from the north. Typically hospitable, Zorgan is a keen singer and regularly opens up his home to musicians, eager to keep traditional Sahrawi songs alive. Pottering about next door is Zorgan's wife Mimi, a reserved lady prone to bouts of giggling, and their 14-year-old, slightly sulky son, another Salah, who seems to have inherited his father's musical talents. Salah's going to sing us a song. Go on, Salah, sing us a song. They, like all other families here, survive on a subsistence programme funded by the UNHCR and supplemented by a small local cash economy that allows them to buy what are described as luxury items like eggs, soap and phone credit. Showers are weekly, but fresh baguettes from the local bakery are plentiful. Now in his early 50s, Zorgan was just 10 when Moroccan troops entered his village and forcibly drove his family from their home. Over several glasses of sugary green tea, he tells me about their abrupt departure, fleeing under cover of darkness to seek sanctuary in neighbouring Algeria.
It's horrible during the night and dark night, there is no moon. We stayed in a valley and then we stayed three days there with the rest of the people without anything, without blanket, without anything.
No
anything.
shelter, nothing.
No shelter, nothing at all.
No food, no water.
No food, no water.
But after a further 15 days hiding in the valley, the Moroccan troops tracked them down.
They discovered that the people gathering in some places because they moved with helicopters and they tried to chasing people.
How did you feel hearing the sound of those helicopters as a little boy?
Well, it's scary scene, it's unbelievable. Everybody try to hide themselves under the rocks, under the trees. It's very scary. You cannot find the words to describe this scene.
Then, wrought with guilt, Zorgan's father made a fateful decision. His wife would continue on with their 8 children, while he returned to fight with the Saharawi resistance movement, the POLISARIO.
Unfortunately, he injured at that time and captured by Morocco. I didn't see him after that capturing, and nothing, no news, nothing from him. So he among the list that disappearing at that time.
Zorgan asked a Moroccan pilot, a political prisoner held by the Sahrawis, what might have happened to his father.
Whenever they captured any prisoner, he took him in a helicopter and investigate that and throw that from the helicopter. I don't know, maybe he among that people.
Thrown alive from a helicopter or buried alive in a mass grave, that's the fate that befell many Sahrawis, according to an ongoing UN investigation into disappeared people from that time.
My mom, she encouraged me not to feel a broken heart for your father. She educated me in a good manner, in a good way. She played the role of my father, my mother, everything.
It must have been a terrible strain, not only on her, but also on all of you and your brothers and sisters.
Yes, the same thing, the same suffering for everything, lack of everything, lack of any minimum things for life.
Eventually, the Sahrawi troops found Zorgan and his family and drove them in trucks to the Algerian border, where a handful of refugee families had started to build shelter, tying their clothes to pieces of wood.
When I arrived as a child, I thought that's the end, that's the disaster. As a child, I didn't familiar with that. I familiar with to live in my house, spoil, these things. But I found myself in the middle of the desert, nothing, no trees, starving. One person who is his picture with me all the time, my father, we've lost everything.
All that families like Zorgan's could do was to restart their lives. Shelter, food, usually butchered camel, and an education, a very basic survival. Nowadays, that struggle is both a source of sorrow and great pride. The Sahrawis have established a functioning government in exile, the POLISARIO. They have an active police force, prisons, hospitals, an education system, even a summer exchange programme for teenagers to Spain. But after 25 years waiting for a referendum on self-determination promised to them by the UN, inertia has started to set in. The UN's mandate was to monitor the ceasefire it brokered in 1991 and help bring about that referendum. So far, Sahrawis say, it has succeeded in only one of its core aims. I approached UN MINURSO, UNHCR and UNICEF's regional offices for their response, but despite waiting for hours in burning desert winds, no one was available to speak to me. As one senior Sahrawi official put it, mounting frustration among Sahrawi youth is like a pressure cooker. One day soon, it will reach boiling point. Oh, it's tough terrain. Running on sand after 1 minute, I'm exhausted. Is it difficult for you now?
Yes, in Europe they run on roads, so it is tough on the sand.
I join Salah fleetingly as he warms up ahead of the race and ask what he thinks is the best way forward.
The main challenges for youth. All of them dream about an independent country. A lot of youth don't believe in peace. To get the land, they need a war for that.
What do you think? Do you think a return to war is the best option?
The best option is war. Living in the occupied territories and living here in the camps. It is not an option. Peace doesn't bring the land.
Hours of driving in searing heat takes me to the Polisario's military base, where I meet Ali Salam Sidi Mohammed. While there are no formal ranks in the Polisario, he's the equivalent of a colonel, a refined man with a neat moustache and a guarded manner.
Now we are working towards a peaceful solution, but at the same time, we are waiting for instructions to liberate our land. Personally, I would love to resume our struggle tonight, not tomorrow, but tonight. But as a disciplined soldier, I have to wait for our leadership's instructions.
Do you understand the frustrations of young people who are calling for a return to war?
I really do understand it, because what has been taken by force will not be restored by any means other than with force.
What's preventing the Sahrawi people from going back to war?
We still have some faith in the UN and the African Union that they will sort this out, otherwise we will give up.
But many of their new recruits, or freedom fighters as they prefer to be called, have long since lost faith. At the military barracks, 19-year-old Dahaman Mohammed Ali tells me why he joined the forces.
There are martyrs who have sacrificed their lives for this, and I want to keep their memory alive. We have studied this since we were very young in school.
What do you think about martyrdom? Do you want it?
Martyrdom, if it's in war, of course I want it. I think that's something valuable, because you are on the right side of history, fighting for your rights and defending them.
And I mean by any means, begging God on my knees, please, please, freedom for Saharawi.
That bid for martyrdom is a refrain I hear throughout my time in Western Sahara. While the interpretation of Islam among individuals is moderate, faith is central to the wider cause, and a part of that is being prepared to give life for land. Hama Mohammed Mahdoud, the supreme religious authority in the camps, explains what's behind this.
We have a strong faith-based doctrine in Sahrawi society, so if they say they want martyrdom, they mean it. We are not hypocrites.
Do you as a religious leader support young people's call for martyrdom?
I prefer a peaceful solution, but I don't prefer it over people's rights. It seems that to get a solution, we need to create a crisis and disorder. They are in defensive jihad. When someone is invading you or attacking you in your land, you have to protect yourself.
Greater still, he says, is the risk of extremist ideology spreading from Mali, Mauritania, Libya and elsewhere in the region. A threat, he says, that's becoming increasingly difficult to counter. Do you have concerns that young people may be recruited by some of the terrorist organisations in neighbouring countries?
في الحقيقة لا يمكن أن ينفي هذا التخوف.
Of course the concern is there and you cannot make it disappear, no matter what you do. There is always the chance that another sheikh or imam preaching a different ideology can be influenced by it. The threat is looming and we cannot get rid of it completely.
So what are the political leadership, the Polisario, doing to counter the risks young people face? The tea here is really good. Not too
we consider that a compliment because it's coming from a British person.
Oh, thank you. We do like our tea. This is Mohammed Baysat, a senior Polisario leader. After postings in Washington, Brussels, Geneva and several other places, he has returned to the camps to work on the international negotiations, hoping to secure Sahrawi independence. Following a feast of camel and couscous, he pours me some sugary green tea and explains why frictions are beginning to appear between generations.
When the international community keep lying to you, when the referendum you are waiting, you were born after the promise of that referendum, and now you are getting a grey hair without seeing that referendum happen. And people tell you, be patient.
What impact does that have on young Sahrawi people specifically?
They think we are traitors or sellouts, and we are just part of the system that is keeping them out of their territory and without their resources and with no solution to their fate.
And how do you respond to that as a member of those authorities?
We, explain to them that the situation is not that simple, that the issues at stake are bigger. Peace is not a solo song. Peace is a tango. Only two can do it. Unless Morocco is obliged to compromise and to negotiate, the situation will continue like this. That pressure must come either from our arms or from international community. So far, international community does not care. The superpowers does not care. So I think it's up to the Sahrawis to oblige Morocco to take them seriously.
Do you think it's likely that you might return to war?
Yes, we will return to war. It's a matter about when and how.
Are you ready for that? Are you prepared?
I think the Sahrawis are a warrior nation. Every Sahrawi has his gun, and every Sahrawi know how to use the gun. There is a say in the Sahrawi culture, is a respected dead man is far better than a humiliated living one.
Put another way, to die with dignity is better than living without it. That sense of nationhood and of rijla, or masculinity, is central to Sahrawi society, and at its heart is war, a fatalistic generation bred on fear and failure, now spoiling for a fight. But not everyone is seeking conflict.
More tea. Chai.
Nomad Fatimatu Ali Lakhal has a naturally breezy manner, beaming as she bustles around her tent, preparing for her sister's wedding.
I have a huge faith and hope that we will one day be independent. Of course, I live in my land, but I want to see the occupied part of it liberated. And I have a huge faith in the POLISARIO, that the things they come for, they will eventually achieve it, which is liberating Western Sahara.
I'm struck by the contrast between the near nihilism I hear from young men and Fatima's optimistic outlook.
We already have our share of being depressed, and maybe this is the time to feel contented and hope God will help us to achieve our independence.
So I'm all dressed in a melfa, which is a traditional dress, and I'm now walking into a Sahrawi wedding, deep in the desert, in a nomadic tent. Okay, walking in. There's about 50 people here, I would say. Oh God, there's way more than that. Oh God, I'm walking into the women's tent. Doing a dance in the middle of a circle.
There is a strong sense of community. We share the good times and celebrate with them and laugh and have a good time. But when it's not raining, it's drought. It gets really difficult.
At the end of the race, surrounded by hordes of fans taking selfies, still donning his sunglasses and neon yellow socks, I catch up with a victorious Salah.
It was a fast race, but alhamdulillah, with the help of all the fans, I won.
We head off through the crowd to get lunch together at a lively local cafe. Salah's keen to get a pizza. How will it feel when you leave your people, when you return and you live far away?
I feel that I am a foreigner, but when I am here, I am comfortable among my people and I can share their experiences and their stories. I could go back to the occupied zones and I have to accept the status quo and ask pardon from the Moroccans. And that's what I don't want.
And that's the case for thousands of young Sahrawis, disillusioned, disempowered and desperate to claim agency at any cost. After decades of failed promises and no sign of a resolution, it's up to them, they say, to rise up and finish what their parents started. Do you feel a sense of hope for the future of the Sahrawi people?
People are so determined to reach the goal they set at the beginning of the revolution. I consider this stage as a bridge before we go back to our country. Without hope, there is no life.
That's it for this edition of Assignment. I'm Nicola Kelly. The producer was Simon Mabin. To hear more from the series, go to bbcworldservice.com/assignment.